Thank you for joining me on this inaugural episode of Pipeline. The first guest that I have on my inaugural episode is an old friend of mine. We met in Carbondale. His name's Matt Schultz. He's a multimedia artist. He's a musician, a writer, a filmmaker, a sculptor. What else, Matt? What am I thinking about? You do everything.
Yeah, now a tattoo artist.
Now a tattoo artist.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Up until the quarantine, we're doing quite well, actually.
Wow. So let me before we get into my questions about your projects, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm first, thanks Scott for having me on. I'm excited that you're doing this podcast. This is fantastic. Great way for us to do stuff while we're all under quarantine and be positive. I think that's the big issue. You ask how I'm doing. It's like everybody else, right? We're trying to get by, staying in your house, not driving yourself crazy.
Yeah, that is true.
It's tough. And I remember seeing this meme, and it showed a picture of a painter painting a canvas, and it said artist before quarantine, and then the next frame was the same picture, and it was artist during quarantine, and the next frame was the same picture, and it was artist after quarantine. And as true as that may be, man, not getting out and being around people and stuff like that, and it's tough. I think it's stressing a lot of people out.
Yeah, and where are you? Where are you located?
I'm in Rockford, Illinois.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And
that's where the shop is.
Yeah. How's the weather and are they Rockfordians?
Rockfordians, yeah.
Yeah. How are they all doing?
They're doing good. I mean, they have a high concentration of COVID.
Really?
One of the worst in the state. Yeah. It's and again, that gets into whole other discussions. Is this idea of why and where that the pandemic is hitting, the concentration points. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
It unfortunately seems to be very economically based.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah, it's they have Governor Pritzker called it the worst county in Illinois last week.
Well, man, stay safe.
Thanks.
Stay safe. I don't want to hear any bad news. So the impetus of this show was I used to kind of guide students in writing their personal statements for grad school and other things. And the three questions I would ask them to really think about is, what have you done in the past that's really important to you? What are you doing now? And what's your plan to coming up? So I kind of rolled that into thinking about this show, and I flew some titles at Jane, which most of them she was just like, no. And I finally settled on Pipeline because that's about projects, and it, quite frankly, it was available.
And that's that is actually a big part of it. I totally
it is.
Yeah.
It was available. So thanks for being on. So let me start with that first question. What's a project that you've worked on, recently, or maybe in the past 5-10 years that you're really proud of, or you found really challenging or really meaningful? I mean, you work in so many different areas of media. I would have no idea which one stands out for you.
Yeah, that is true. You can, so to plug that, you can go to mattschultz.com and check out my entire online web portfolio. And so, I would say one of the biggest projects that I worked on, and I find very poignant and ironic, this is one of those things where years later, a decade later, it came back to me, was The Division, which you're very familiar with. Mm-hmm. And I created that project, which was a farcical hermetic fraternal order. And it was a museum exhibition with some 50 exhibits, pieces all I made, sculpted myself. It had a narrative. There was a website, all these things. You can go to thedivision.org and see the totality of this whole project. It took 3 years to make it, and quite a bit of money too. It was a very laborious, long project. But what was funny is the lead character that I had for this project was this trickster crow, which I based off of the Plague Doctor back then. And so now I'm actually seeing these Plague Doctor masks that you can buy online for your mask in public, which I think is really like, it honestly didn't hit me until last week that I was like, oh my gosh, the Division, you know? And one of the things that I'm seeing in our culture, and this is again where I want to do my podcast, is we're talking more sociologically speaking about like people and culture, is this idea that everything is planned to divide us. I mean, the construct is by proxy division, you know? And so I was thinking about that I created this thing about the Division, and one of the underlying tones of the history was they were anti-fascist. So they were Antifa and they fought against fascism. And, you know, right now I'm seeing this, like, there it is, the Plague Doctor, you know, on one half, and then these neo-Nazis in Michigan, you know, showing up into the Capitol building, fully armed in tactical gear, you know, and for me and my perspective and the way I pay attention to media, you know, these are some seriously scary issues. To me, more scary than COVID by far. I think COVID is almost nothing in comparison to the unleashing that, you know, like Trump is calling these guys very good people, you know?
Mhm.
Well, I mean, to me, I have no problem drawing correlations to Hitler having the SA. That was a private military force that supported him up to his presidency when he was elected. And so, you know, they were turned into the SS then eventually. So, you know, you have the same thing as just one of the most highly armed right-wing militia corps, you know, declaring their freedom because they don't want to wear a face mask in public, you know? And so, yeah, the Division has really come back around for me. And, you know, again, because I was like, wow, there was kind of almost some unknown foreshadowing for me with that project, you know? And so again, go to the division.org and you can check that out in its totality.
Have you, and I'll say when I first saw more than 2 weeks ago, the first pictures of Plague Doctors, I mean, I immediately thought of your show. And
yeah, it's
so
funny because, yeah, go ahead.
Have you been tracking? Have you had a little more traffic at your website, or?
Well, no, that's the thing is it just kind of came to me a couple of days, and I thought maybe it's time to you know, bring this back to life and start really plugging it, because I wrote a brief essay that I put on Facebook. There's a Division page, and again, you know, you can follow me through the Matt Schultz page and find it there. But you know, I was really thinking about that, the trickster crow, and maybe I'll give you a picture and we can put that up there or link to it or something like that. But the trickster crow was really the iconic master image or character for the Division, and what he represented is so poignant. You know, like he's wearing a priest robe. You know, so it's basically a Plague Doctor mask with some crow feathers coming out. But his outfit, he's wearing a priest's Catholic priest robe, and then he has basically this leather suicide vest on. And then there's 10 scrolls in there, and each scroll, it just says the word in 10 different languages. And when you stand back and look at it, they look like sticks of dynamite, you know. And he's holding his tail feather, which is the peacock, you know, this representation of moisture, you know, braggadociousness, kind of, you know, this whole thing. And he's penning this whole thing with his own tail feather, you know. So he has a quill that is a peacock feather, and then his suicide vest is language, you know. And I just keep thinking how poignant that one piece is. It's just so completely relevant because, you know, we talk about the age of like post-truth where we're at now with the media and Trump and stuff like this. I mean, it's beyond it. I can find articles that will, legitimate sourced articles that will say the herd immunity is impossible without inoculations, right? At the same time, and it doesn't work, and Sweden's failing. And 2 weeks later, they're saying Sweden's great, it's totally working. And they're both totally valid news sources, if not the same news source. Mm-hmm. And so we're at this point where we're so divided. And I just think it's ironic, you know, like you and I as creatives using the internet to do something positive like this with this show and, you know, podcasts and stuff. But we're totally divided. Like we can't sit in the same room, you know, and meet and have these conversations. And this just shows you how completely divided we are in every way, shape, and form, you know?
Yeah, I never I mean, if you would have asked me, and it's because of my own naivete, if you would have asked me a year, 2 years ago, do you think you're going to, experience a pandemic in your lifetime? I would have said no. We've got the technology and the healthcare and we'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have been more wrong.
Well, and again, I mean, I don't mean to demean and any of the deaths, and I'm it's
No,
terrible,
I know.
it's terrible. But the fact is like, to me, the pandemic is nothing in comparison to this kind of right wing. I mean, that right wing militia is just dying to come out of the closet. They're just waiting. Like, in my opinion, it's like Kristallnacht. What happened was that night of Kristallnacht was Hitler said to his SA, "Go out and get those Jews." And so they showed up at the store and they threw a brick through the window and they looked at the cops and the cops didn't do anything. So they threw another brick through. The cops didn't do anything. So they walked inside and they grabbed a Jewish person and dragged him outside. Cops still didn't do anything. It's exactly what we're seeing happening in real time, but we're distracted from the pandemic. I mean, these are literal people showing up in Idaho. They had a military truck. They showed up in like the standard US military vehicle, threw the tarp open, and 50 well-armed guys got out and went into the Capitol building. So it's not just the pandemic. I mean, there's a lot of underlying stuff, the fact that the FDA has been wiped out, all of these things, every single meat manufacturing facility now, everybody tests positive for COVID,
Mm-hmm.
and Trump's saying like, keep them going,
Yeah.
So that is my focus. Admittedly, you ask where I'm heading. I do want to do a podcast and with my friend Blake Detheridge, and we've been talking about it kind of under the auspice of these unique perspectives that I call it between the lines, in the sense, not the name of the podcast, but when I post on Facebook, is this idea that there's an entire element that, say, my predominantly liberal friend group is not aware of at all. Do you know what I mean? They're really not paying attention. For instance, if you look at one of the largest online assault rifle companies, websites, Sportsman's Guide, I went in there and looked the other day, and it was assault rifle section, right? And they're from lowest to most expensive. And you look at the lowest one and it's sold out. Next one sold out. So I started scrolling, sold out. I went through, I counted it. There was over 60 available assault rifles from like $500 to $5,000, and all of them were sold out. Yeah. So if one of the largest online assault rifle sales companies in the United States is sold out of every single priced assault rifle, in my opinion, the COVID pandemic is the least of our worries at this point. I'm sorry, and again, I know some people are infected, and I don't mean to demean anybody. It's terrible, but
So you and who are you partnering with for this?
Blake Detheridge. He's a friend of mine in Springfield, Illinois. So I'm working with him, and he'll co-host it because our rants are pretty fun. And I think just have a unique perspective that most people aren't getting, and that's what I want to offer, is kind of a unique perspective where, again, you can see between the lines, and most people are not seeing this stuff. It's the same thing. Like if you go to Amazon and I looked up shooting goggles, they were sold out, everything. I went to my grocery store recently, and I went into the spray paint section, and all earth tones were sold out. And I'm standing there looking at it, and I'm thinking, why is it the dark, all the browns, all the greens? And I was like, oh, everybody's camouflaging everything they own. I can't really come up with another reason that every single earth tone would be sold out of the paint section.
Yeah.
And so apparently there's a lot of movement going on under this of the survivalist, militant, whatever auspice, so to speak. So.
Yeah. And that's what you're going to focus on, more social issues like that.
Yeah. And I think one of the foundational things is this idea of that I kind of constantly keeps coming back in our discussions, is this narcissistic culture. right? And so the fact that our culture breeds sociopathology, right? And it perpetuates and condones and promotes sociopathology, right? So again, you can watch, like a great example is the TV show Dexter, where it's quite literally a psychopath, but yet you're asked as your lead character to engage and sympathize with him. And there are moments of compassion which would go against psychopathology with the character, but by proxy, you basically have what, I don't know, is it 10 years that show ran or whatever of this, you're cheering for a psychopath, right? The entire construct of the show is a promotion of sociopathology. And I think we need to start looking at our society on that sense. And that comes from for me, a capitalistic viewpoint, like, again, capitalism is the root of evil here. And that capitalism promotes sociopathology. Corporations by proxy can be defined as sociopathic, right? So we need to readdress our culture. And so for me, in my artwork, especially with like the podcast or, even the world is backward memes I do on Facebook, the comedy stuff is a means of trying to kind of expose this and enlighten the culture to this,
Yeah. Do you have a name for the podcast yet?
Honestly, I was thinking radical ideas because I did it. I did the YouTube search, or I'm sorry, the iTunes search, and that wasn't there. It wasn't used. So I was like, I'll take that, yeah. And I don't want it to be so ridiculous. It's not by any means, we're more analytical and it's conspiratorial by definition. You'd lump it in there, but it's certainly not Alex Jones bullshit, So that's one of the things I think in the next month, there's plenty of time to work on it. As you know, let's do stuff.
So what are you currently doing? I know this is a weird time for everybody, especially tattoo artists or people who work, one-on-one with people. So what are you working on now?
Well, I think that's one, and again, I love that this question came up and we are able to do this podcast. I was writing about this kind of, one of my definitions for doing art has always been as a means of social influence, right? So I'm kind of, as opposed to say like, I'm an expressionist painter and I don't give a shit what's going on in the world. I just sit in my studio and paint expressionist paintings, right? That's great. Wonderful. Good for that painter. But I'm not that way. To me, like the outsider artist who does stuff just for themselves. To me, I don't work that way at all. I'm very reactive and I'm responsive to my environment. And that's very much on a political scale and to some degree, obviously a personal scale. So musically, I tend to create things that are more emotionally based. As I do, I've been on 36 records and 9, I think, solo. I don't even remember it. I think it is 9 solo records, and each one of those, is a mood that I'm feeling at that time when I create it. But a lot of stuff like The Division or this podcast is just straight, artistic kind of commentary, to some degree. It's social commentary. And when I find, and I hate to say this, but if there's no hope, I don't care to create art.
And what do you mean by if there's no hope? How do you ascertain that?
Exactly. I mean, I think it's funny because I am just coming out of this, but for the past couple months, I couldn't bring myself to make anything, and I run the sweat lodges and I also do, ayahuasca ceremonies and stuff like this. I've done years and years of shamanic practice and work, and I'm a peace pipe carrier with the Lakota. Like, this is the thing. It's like, I am beyond healing myself as a starting point at this point. I just cannot find, I can't get grounded. I can't concentrate, so it is kind of, I'd admittedly say I've been depressed for the last few months. And it's only been until recently that I'm starting to come out of it and get grounded and centered and start to figure out, what I'm going to do. Because in that depression, I'm like, why make art? Like if we're going to die in a couple months or the world's ending, the economy's collapsing, maybe I should be learning, trauma first aid skills instead, I mean, seriously, that's where my mind was. And I had somebody write me the other day and asked for some guidance on, they were having some turmoil in their life and they were just, and it was through, again, my Matthew John Facebook page with the sweat lodges and stuff. and it was beautiful because it forced me, it was a mirror, and it forced me to look at myself. And then and as I wrote this person back some advice to help them, I realized I was really writing it to myself.
Mm-hmm. Now, and I was going to ask you, you said you've been coming out of it. Are there specific strategies or activities that you've used to?
Yeah, I mean,
come out of it?
I think one of these, and again, I'm by no means, the master answer. I don't have the answers on these
Right.
levels of like,
Right.
Krishna Das or something, with some Alan Watts amazing wisdom. But I think one of the things is for me particularly, and this is tough for those who don't have some type of spiritual practice, but it's like sage cleansing the house, sage cleansing yourself, meditation. I mean, I think meditation in any form is brilliant, and it's so hard. I mean, it's so weird. It's like going to the gym. You're like, well, I'd rather smoke this cigarette and drink a cup of coffee. Like.
Yeah.
And so it's like this challenge to go, like, you got to force yourself to work out. You got to force yourself to meditate and really not go for the clear thought. And this is one of the things I am working on now. And I literally wrote it yesterday and today is I'm going to take some of this music I scored and do a mindful meditation for people that talks you through this. It doesn't have to be the type of meditation where you're trying not to think, right? The mindful meditation is the distracting meditation.
Right.
And especially when somebody's guiding it for you, they can create it. And so it really is, I'm really approaching it with like a light worker sensibility where it's about envisioning the light inside of you and how to manifest that light and let it grow and let it envelop you. And, it has beautiful music. And so that's one of the projects where, I'm moving now. And like we've been saying, I don't think the political stuff is as relevant maybe as the spiritual stuff at this point in America and where we're at. Maybe the artistic creativity should be geared more towards just the spirituality, like a mindful meditation. I mean, because Lord knows I can't run sweat lodges.
Yeah. And if you're going to explore mindful meditation, now is not a bad time to do it if you can't go out of the house.
That's exactly it. I mean, if you're stuck with yourself in your own head, you might as well start practicing how to wrangle that monkey.
Yeah.
And learn to enjoy yourself, because a lot of this is a reflection upon yourself, everything.
Yeah.
But this is really bringing it down, like that, the kind of the inmate who finds spirituality in a cell, because there's nothing else to do but find that self.
It's a monastic life at that point.
Actually, you're totally right. Yes. We could all be little monks.
Yeah.
Let's all be cute little monks in our houses. I like that. I like that. Yeah.
Wow. Well, Matt, we're at time. I really appreciate you coming on and being the first guest of my first episode.
I'm honored, Scott.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And hopefully I'll be able to keep it going. And it would be great to have you back to find out about your podcast and see what happens with the division.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you can, share that, mattschultz.com with people, and that will lead you to everything, I'm connected with, from the sweat lodges to the division, anything like that. So, and thank you for having me on, Scott. This is great. It's great seeing your face too.
Great seeing you, brother. You take care. All right.
Okay. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, man. Bye-bye.